Hi, my name's Tony Ridley. Once again, thanks for joining us in the Crisis Leadership Management Education tutorials. In this section, we're talking about stakeholder identification and analysis. And at this stage, we're up to discussing and identifying mapping and project management of our overall analysis. So we spoke about a simplified four-step approach previously in identification of stakeholders, understanding the relationship that they have with us, interpreting how they're likely to respond or how we can shape that respond, and then implementing processes and procedures to make sure that we have consistency, quality control, or we're identifying any triggers that support our outcome or could potentially negatively impact on our campaign, project, and overall management of the situation. So getting into a more detailed process and more methodical approach is we need to make this as both simple for individuals using the systems, but ensuring that we can have a degree of consistency in our approach and certainly replicatable processes that in the event that somebody else has to engage or evaluate stakeholders, or in the event of an audit or in the event of an investigation, record keeping for whatever purpose, or even quality control after the event, is it needs to be something that is demonstratable. It can't, again, be something in your head on the back of a napkin or something you scratch out on a whiteboard. There needs to be a system of processes, checklists, guides, and so on. So one of the first things that we need to do is identify internal and external. Some of the internal stakeholders that we may have vary from owners, executive management, middle management, front-end employees, client-facing elements, departments, production, procurements, IT, internal suppliers, and internal customers that we may service as a shared resource. So it's important to this is why I always advocate having flowcharts and having wire diagrams. So at a quick glance, or as a easy means of reckoning and reference, is that you can go back and look at some of the internal structures. A to B to C, this department does this for that one, organisation charts, who's got connection. All of these things need to be evaluated or contextualised in the event of a negative event. So when we're talking about crisis management, we need to look at, we need to have, and this is why it's of utmost importance to ensure that your crisis management team either understands your business, understands the internal working mechanisms, or that you have adequate internal representation. So it's not something that you can 100% outsource. You can certainly have experienced and qualified counsel, but you really do need internal experts that understand the morality of the organisation, the culture, and certainly the connectivity between departments and functions. And then next we look at the external stakeholders. The external stakeholders range from suppliers, investors, competitors, shareholders, customers, advisors, welfare groups, non-government organisations, residents, politicians, associations, Chamber of Commerce, and the list goes on. And it's not just a case of trying to document any and every known organisation, but those that directly affect you on a day-to-day basis, but certainly those that have risen to the top or certainly play a more prominent role in this particular event. So it's important, first of all, just to divide and identify who's internal and external. Then one of the best formulating exercises that I use quite regularly is to use post-it notes, or the palm cards and business cards, is basically just to jot all of these various elements down onto cards and post-it notes and then quickly lay them out on a boardroom table or on a wall. You can quickly and efficiently then triage and separate who is internal and external. You can have all eyes looking at it, and there's obviously a number of electronic programs that you can do that on, a whiteboard, PowerPoint, projection screen, and so on. But just the concept of being able to identify each piece of data and information, separate it, and then the group look at it and then rationalize it in a collective forum is extremely effective when we're talking about the brainstorming stage of identification and the evaluation of shareholders. Then as we go into the typology, we need to understand what sort of latency issues, discretionary dependencies, whether they're dangerous, dominant, independent, all of those sorts of things. We need to break down what degree of power and influence, the degree of urgency and the legitimacy that they have over us. There could be an NGO organisation or a community group that claims to have significant influence and interest, but in reality they may not. Or conversely, you've underestimated the influence that they have as a majority over politicians and governing bodies and Chamber of Commerce and so on. These sorts of things, again, all need to be structured and laid out, whether you use Venn diagrams, whether you use Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, whatever the case may be. It needs to be a system to identify and break down the degree of influence and the urgency in which you need to communicate. Then we can go into more structured or more formulaic approaches, and we can use mind maps. Here's an example of mind maps when we're talking about environmental issues and governments and customers, employees. I find and certainly recommend mind maps to be very expedient and time efficient when we're talking about this particular data. So we've evolved from post-it notes and palm cards, and we're now using electronic processes. It's also very good to see symbiotic relationships and crossover elements or those hidden relationships that when you think about the first level or the top tier of engagement and communication, you often don't necessarily delve into deep enough. For example, you may share a major supplier with a competitor. So as a result, if that supplier is affected, then there's a very good chance that your competitor is also affected. Or it's a unit that services a variety, a service provider that has a variety of inputs into the organisation, and you're not the only one that's affected because all services have been affected. If we talk power outages, all those sorts of things you need to consider. Then we can break it down again to just basically put a fireworks, starburst, chrysanthemum type approach, and start to finesse and improve the structure of what we've taken the time and effort to document, because we need to communicate this to others. And this is part of the fundamental reason of using visuals and graphics, is that at some stage we either need to brief somebody who is not with the team, somebody who was away, or, as I've emphasised time and time again, practically very few crisis management teams are in the same physical location. So we need to construct and have a flowchart or a wire diagram or something that we can quickly and efficiently refer back to time and time again. From there, we can then start to, whether you choose to use colours or not, but we can then start to use positive and negative aspects. We can start to evaluate in what context do these relationships exist. Are they pro? Are they anti? And not only from a historical position, but what is their stance over this particular issue? If it's a scandalous or infactual or a violation, then even fair weather friends, we may find that we're re-evaluating those relationships, and it's important not to make any assumptions and make sure that we've documented this so as all parties are aware, so as we don't overlook or delay a communication that should now be a priority because of the nature of the crisis, the circumstances, and the relationship has certainly changed. Then, as we start to look at the connectivity, we need to look at the interrelationships, the symbiotic relationships that I spoke about before. Where are they overlapping? Where are they shared? Are they negative towards us and positive towards other people or departments? So that can also help us shape who our envoy or our spokesperson or our ambassador is going to be in terms of the relationship. Do we send this particular person, or do we use that department to engage with them if it's already barbarous or it's a toxic relationship, or it's very good, the first name basis? All those sorts of things need to be factored into to determine who the appropriate and effective spokesperson is going to be. And last but not least, having an aerial view at all times is extremely effective, and where possible to visualize all of these relationships, internal, external, whether they be part of the company environment or the public environment. It's paramount that the crisis management team not only have a consensus or a quorum, but also everybody is aware of the factors that went into it and the continuing factors, because as part of this process, stakeholder analysis needs to be revisited and reevaluated on a far more frequent basis, because the inject of additional information, whether it be our own or external parties, will shape and change those relationships. So we need to be able to replicate and manage this quickly and efficiently. So again, that's just an overview of some of the different approaches and options for doing project management and project mapping and analysis of stakeholders in this series of stakeholder analysis and evaluations. If you want any further information or more tutorials on this subject, please visit the website at www.crisismanagement.tony-ridley.com. That's all for now. Once again, thank you and goodbye.